it's an interesting time in the UK in terms of the elections going to be there in the next 15 days of time. We would see changes coming in the government as well as probably followed with some tax changes that has been discussed very hotly today. So that's a very important part of being here. And I'm looking forward to understanding what happens to the environment out here in the investment climate, that I can go back and advise my clients what is it going to be the changes that should be there that could be compelling from an investment perspective. I think what I'm hearing very largely on the subject is that non-dom is going to really unsettle a position that's been there for a period of time and bring about changes in how non-residents will be taxed going forward. Some of them will really look at, if I speak for the investors in the UK from the outsiders perspective, I think this is going to be something that we want to watch out very closely, because these changes could mean ground level changes that we have not probably anticipated as the investments were being made in the UK. So we were watching this space very anxiously to understand what is it going to be that we would need to advise our clients as we go back and see those changes happening in the UK. So essentially, if I look at from the perspective of the high net worth individuals coming out from India, there are some continuing themes of investment that are there in the UK, one being the real estate, where Indians made large investments in the last year. Probably, as I reckon, probably the second largest investments were made by the Indians. Some of these properties and which were picked up last year are under development at this point of time. The second is the large Indian UK market, which is there in terms of the business and the access to the European market, which is again a compelling reason. And I think Indians have made investments over a period of last couple of decades, if I put it, successively to bring about investments in the UK, manufacture here, do business here, and I think this continues to be a very important part of the India's investment. The third is the access to the financial markets, which is there. Again, that's a very important part for the Indians to come into the UK, because UK offers a very stable and robust financial market system, which is not there in India. And Indian companies do look forward to coming to the UK for this particular purpose. And lastly, I would say is that as Indians want to find out how to globalize their investments, or they want to offshore their wealth, UK is a very important and strategic part of it. And I think in that context, the inheritance tax would have a very important role to play as our clients plan their investments to make their assets offshore, if I put it that way. I think if I put it that way, obviously this black money is something that we hear all the time in India, as much as you hear the changes that happens to the non-dom regulations in the UK. We have shifts of sand happening over here in terms of the reporting that is required. I'm not sure if we are still going to be able to catch the tiger's tail in terms of the black money trail that is there in the world. But I think what the system really is able to bring about is it's going to make it very difficult to hold black money anywhere in the world. And I think that's a very important development that's happening in India at this point of time. So I think that's a very, very important change that's happening in India that I would probably see for myself. I think there are two very important things that I could say in this regard. Number one is that people do not invest money and look at tax as a big driver of their investment decision making. They make investments out of the economic opportunities which are there in the UK. And I think those are several of them. And I just put out some of them, even as I spoke about the number of opportunities that Indian investors want to look at in the UK. So that's the first part, is that the tax is not a very important part of this decision-making process, although it is something that is to be looked at as much as the economic opportunity that is there. Given that, on the second side is that if the regulations become very compelling and very, very disengaging in terms of the investment that need to be made, investors will choose to move away, because as we experience in India is that when we make regulations in India which are very investor unfriendly, we chase away the investments in India, and we have done it unfortunately in India for the last 2 years, and we're trying to bring those back, and it's not happening as well as we would have liked to do that. As much as that in the UK, same examples would prevail, is that if you make it very difficult for people to make investments in the UK, you will probably chase them away, because as investors, and there are, in a global world at this point of time, there are many choices to make, UK being one of the choices. It's not the only choice to be made. Just as much we believed in India as that India is the only choice that the investors had. That's not true. So investors may choose to move away and look at investments in other parts of the world if they find it very difficult to make investments in the UK and sustain themselves, if tax is a very compelling part of that story. So that's the way I would look at it.